I am Stephanie Ward, 27 years old, and my life has been a fight to be taken seriously. My family always branded me the dramatic one, the attention seeker who made it all up. But that night at our Minneapolis family dinner, everything changed. I choked on my food, my chest tightened, and I could barely draw a breath. Mom snapped, "Quit faking it!" Her voice cutting through the chatter. My sister piled on, sneering, I was just dodging cleanup duty. As my face turned purple and my hands clawed at the table, they still thought it was an act. Then my brother made a call that changed everything. The EMT stormed in, checked my pulse, and yelled for a stretcher. Suddenly, the room exploded in panic. What happened next? It nearly ended me, but it exposed a truth they'd buried for years. Before I tell you more, I'm curious, what time is it where you're listening, and which city are you in? I'm thrilled to know how far my story's reaching. Growing up in the Ward household in Minneapolis meant enduring one unbreakable rule: weakness was not tolerated. My mother, Karen Ward, managed our home like she handled her nursing shifts at the community clinic, with strict schedules and zero patience for excuses. She stood 5 feet 7 inches tall, her hands steady from years of patient care, and her tone always carried that edge of authority that brooked no argument. Dad's death in a car crash when I was 5 left her to raise me, my older sister Tiffany, and my younger brother Travis on her own. Any hint of vulnerability got crushed under lectures about toughing it out or facing real hardships. From my earliest recollections, illness meant skepticism rather than care. At 7, a sore throat made swallowing agony, but Mom forced me to school anyway, insisting I was avoiding chores. The teacher sent me home with confirmed strep throat, and the doctor warned about potential complications from the delay, yet Mom dismissed it as my overreaction. That started the cycle. Tiffany, 3 years my senior, and Mom's shadow amplified it all. With her confident stride and quick judgments, she'd say things like, "Stephanie's being dramatic again," during family meals, ensuring the label stuck. The only ally I had was Travis, 3 years younger, and the quiet fixer in our house. He'd slip me water or a blanket when attacks hit, sitting silently until I steadied, even if it meant defying Mom's no-coddling policy. The dismissals piled up through childhood. In middle school at 10, asthma episodes left me wheezing and panicked, but Mom called them attention grabs to skip gym class. Tiffany would smirk and add, "She's fine, just watch." One severe attack landed me in urgent care. After I collapsed during recess, the inhaler prescribed only after hours of untreated distress. By 13, a bike fall broke my arm, pain surging like electricity, but Mom made me complete yard work, first convinced it was a bruise from clumsiness. The X-ray showed the fracture, and the delay caused extra swelling, but no remorse followed, only a reminder to be more careful. These incidents etched deep doubts in me. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe others handled pain better. I internalized it, pushing through fevers and aches without complaint, which oddly reinforced their view that earlier issues were fabrications. High school migraines doubled me over in nausea, confining me to dark rooms, but Mom attributed them to hormonal excuses for missing homework. Tiffany, then in college for education, would phone in with laughs, still pulling that routine. One migraine revealed a sinus infection needing antibiotics, but by then I'd failed a quiz and earned extra chores as punishment. Escape came with acceptance to medical school at the University of Minnesota, 200 miles away in a bustling campus environment. Roommates like Danielle never doubted my symptoms. She'd adjust lights or fetch meds without question. Professors extended deadlines for legitimate health needs, validating me for the first time. I specialized in pulmonology, drawn ironically to respiratory issues after my asthma history. Graduation brought clarity and resolve. Their gaslighting had warped my self-trust, so I started documenting it all. A discreet notebook captured every past dismissal, the ignored strep delayed fracture, mocked asthma. As technology advanced, I incorporated voice recordings from holiday visits, catching Mom's curt denials or Tiffany's sarcastic jabs. This evolved into my long-term project. Reviewing entries in my dorm late nights, I'd connect the dots of neglect, fueling a quiet determination. Someday, I vowed, this evidence will force them to see. Post-residency, I secured a pulmonology position at a St. Paul clinic, limiting family contact to obligatory calls and brief trips with exit strategies. Interactions stayed superficial, avoiding triggers. But the healthcare cuts during economic shifts hit hard. My clinic downsized, and as a junior specialist, I was laid off. Savings evaporated under loans and rent pressures. After months of fruitless applications, I relented and returned to Minneapolis, accepting Mom's offer of the garage guest room rent-free until stability returned. Travis, working as a lab technician nearby, welcomed me warmly. Tiffany, teaching at a local elementary school, offered vague networking tips through her contacts. This homecoming differed. I'd packed not just clothes, but hidden recording devices, subtle cameras disguised in everyday items ready to capture unfiltered reactions. As an unusual fatigue crept in that week, accompanied by a nagging calf ache suggesting deeper trouble, I felt a grim anticipation. Their pattern would surface again, but this time on record. If they dismissed what could be serious, it would seal their own fate. The family dinner loomed as the ideal stage where old habits might play out under my watchful lens. The healthcare cuts hit like a freight train. My pulmonology job at the St. Paul Clinic vanished when budget slashes targeted newer hires. Student loans and city rent burned through my savings in 4 months, leaving me no choice but to pack up and head back to Minneapolis. Mom's offer of the guest room above her garage came with strings she expected me to earn my keep. I pulled into our suburban driveway, the familiar chill of Minnesota's late fall biting through my jacket, carrying not just my bags, but a discreet arsenal, hidden cameras and recording devices tucked into my purse and coat pockets. My years of documenting their dismissals in a notebook had evolved. This time I'd capture undeniable proof on video. If Mom and Tiffany fell back into their old pattern of calling me dramatic, I'd have them on tape exposing the gaslighting I'd endured for decades. The family dinner was Mom's monthly ritual, a forced gathering in our cozy fireplace-lit dining room to keep us close. With me back home, she dumped the planning on me, saying it was time I contributed something worthwhile. I spent days scrubbing the house, drafting a menu, and shopping for ingredients, all while juggling job applications for remote medical consulting gigs. The pressure to make everything flawless was crushing. Any mistake would fuel their narrative of my incompetence. But beneath the stress, a strange calm settled in. My cameras were ready, one clipped inside my bag, another disguised as a phone charger on the counter, both angled to catch the dining table. If they dismissed me again, it'd be their downfall. 3 days before the dinner, an unusual tiredness hit me. My body felt sluggish, like wading through mud, and a dull ache pulsed in my right calf. By evening, climbing the stairs to the kitchen left me winded, a faint tightness creeping into my chest. My pulmonology training screamed warning signs, deep vein thrombosis possibly leading to a pulmonary embolism. I pressed my fingers to the sore spot on my leg, feeling the tenderness and knew the risks. But instead of speaking up, I stayed silent. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. If I hinted at feeling off and they brushed it aside, the cameras would record every word, every eye roll. I wasn't just enduring their neglect anymore, I was setting a trap to let them dig their own graves. I kept up the facade, hauling groceries and arranging chairs, each task heavier than it should have been. The ache in my leg grew sharper, and catching my breath took effort, but I pushed through knowing the stakes. Travis noticed something was wrong the second he walked in from his shift at the lab. His brows furrowed as he watched me pause, leaning against the counter to steady myself. "You look exhausted, Steph," he said quietly, setting down his keys. "You okay?" I forced a smile, adjusting the camera in my bag to ensure it was still recording. "Just tired from all this prep," I replied, my voice casual. "Don't say anything to Mom or Tiffany, okay? Let's see how they handle it." He hesitated, his eyes searching mine, but nodded, trusting me despite his concern. That evening, I called Danielle, my college roommate and lifeline. I sank onto the guest room bed, the phone pressed to my ear, and described the fatigue and leg pain in vague terms. "That doesn't sound right, Stephanie," she said, her voice sharp with worry. "You're a doctor. You know this could be serious. Get it checked out." I glanced at the tiny camera hidden on the shelf, its red light steady. "I'll rest tonight." I lied, deflecting her advice. "It's probably just stress from being back here." She pushed back, insisting I see a doctor, but I brushed it off, promising to monitor it. Hanging up, I lay back, my heart racing slightly, not just from the symptoms, but from the plan taking shape. If this was what I suspected, the dinner would be the perfect stage. By the morning of the dinner, the symptoms had worsened. A shower left me dizzy, forcing me to sit on the tub's edge to catch my breath. The calf pain now stabbed with each step, and a faint pressure lingered in my chest like a weight pressing down. I wrapped my leg in a compression bandage, popped some over-the-counter painkillers, and kept moving. My training told me to get to a hospital, but years of being called a liar drowned out that voice. Instead, I double-checked the cameras, ensuring their batteries were charged and their angles clear. The dining room looked festive, candles flickering, table set for 8, a spread of roast chicken and sides I'd prepped through sheer willpower. But every movement drained me, my breaths shallower than they should have been. Travis showed up early, carrying a cooler of drinks. He took one look at me, pale, moving slower than usual, and his face tightened. "Steph, you don't look good," he said, lowering his voice so Mom bustling in the kitchen wouldn't hear. "What's going on?" I shrugged, stacking plates to avoid his gaze. "Just a long week. Can you grab the napkins?" He didn't buy it. His hand hovering near his phone as if ready to call someone, but I shot him a look that said, "Not yet." I needed Mom and Tiffany to react first to say the words I knew were coming. The cameras were rolling and the trap was set. As guests began arriving, our grandmother, cousins Tiffany, with her usual critical sweep of the setup, the stage was ready. My symptoms were building, the pain sharper, my breaths harder to draw. This wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a race against my own body, and I was betting everything on their next mistake. The dining room glowed under the soft flicker of candles, the table laden with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans I'd spent hours preparing. The warmth of the fireplace battled the Minnesota chill seeping through the windows, but my body felt heavier with each passing minute. My calf throbbed sharper now, the pain pulsing in rhythm with my quickening heartbeat. Breathing felt like sipping air through a straw, shallow, unsatisfying. I knew the signs from my pulmonology training. A pulmonary embolism was closing in, the blood clot, likely breaking free from my leg. But as family members filed in, my grandmother, cousins Tiffany, with her usual critical glance at the table setting, I adjusted the hidden camera in my bag, its lens trained on the scene. This was it. The stage was set, and I was ready to let them expose themselves. I sat across from Mom, her sharp eyes scanning the spread as she nodded grudgingly. Tiffany, in her pressed blouse, took her seat with a faint smirk, already whispering to a cousin about my overdone decor. Travis slipped in last, his lab technician scrubs swapped for a sweater, his gaze lingering on me with that same worry from earlier. I gave him a subtle shake of my head, urging silence. The plan hinged on Mom and Tiffany reacting as they always had. To push the moment I ate quickly, piling food onto my plate and swallowing fast, knowing it could trigger a choke to mask the worsening symptoms. My chest tightened further, each breath a conscious effort, but I kept my face neutral, waiting for their move. Halfway through the meal, it hit. A piece of chicken caught in my throat, amplifying the pressure in my chest. I coughed hard, my hands gripping the table as my vision blurred at the edges. The room quieted, forks pausing midair. Mom's eyes narrowed, her voice slicing through the silence. "Quit faking it, Stephanie," she snapped, setting her glass down with a thud. "You're not getting out of dishes with this act." Tiffany leaned forward, her tone dripping with disdain. "Always the same excuse to avoid cleanup. Can't you just eat like a normal person?" Their words caught on the camera's audio were exactly what I'd banked on. My face felt hot, my lips tingling as oxygen dwindled, but they sat unmoved, assuming another performance. I tried to speak to push the trap further, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. The choke wasn't just a ploy now, the embolism was peaking, a crushing weight in my lungs. I gasped, my hands clawing at the tablecloth, pulling a napkin to the floor. My face, I knew from my training, was turning purple, a telltale sign of cyanosis. Travis shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "She's not faking," he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Mom waved him off, her expression hardening. "Sit down, Travis. She's fine. She's always fine." But he ignored her, fumbling for his phone. "I'm calling 911, he said, dialing, as Tiffany scoffed. "You're buying into her drama now." The camera, still rolling, captured every second, Mom's dismissive glare, Tiffany's mocking laugh, the cousins' uneasy glances. My vision tunneled dark spots, dancing as I slumped forward, knocking a glass to the floor. It shattered, the sound jarring the room. Travis's voice rose urgent, giving our address to the dispatcher. "My sister can't breathe. She's collapsing." Mom stood, her arms crossed, muttering about embarrassment, but a flicker of doubt crossed her face as I wheezed, barely audible. "Grandmother Helen Ward." Her frail frame tense at the table's end, finally spoke. "Karen, look at her. This isn't right." Her words, sharp and rare, cut through, but Mom only shook her head. Sirens wailed closer within minutes, a fast response typical for Minneapolis emergencies. The front door burst open and 2 EMTs rushed in, their equipment clattering. A young woman knelt beside me, her fingers finding my wrist. "Pulse is 140, thready, oxygen, SATs critical," she called to her partner, her voice tight with alarm. "Get the stretcher now." The room erupted, cousins scrambling back, chairs toppling. Mom froze, her face paling as the EMTs moved with practiced urgency, slipping an oxygen mask over my face. Tiffany backed against the wall, her earlier smirk gone. Travis stayed close, his hand on my shoulder, repeating, "Hang on, Steph." In the ambulance, the oxygen helped marginally, but each breath was a battle. The EMTs spoke in clipped tones, terms like cyanotic and tachycardic filtering through my haze. Travis rode with me, his face drawn as he answered their questions about my symptoms. At the hospital, a team whisked me through the ER doors, fluorescent lights blurring overhead. A doctor, her badge reading Dr. Ellis, leaned in, her voice steady. "Stephanie, we're running tests, but this looks like a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in your lungs. You're lucky we got you here." She ordered a chest CT, and heparin, her team moving fast. Later in the ER bay, she returned with the results. "Massive clot from your leg, blocked a major artery. If we'd been 30 minutes later, you wouldn't have made it." The cameras, still in my bag left at home, held the truth of that night. Mom and Tiffany's dismissals recorded, clear as day. As I lay there, monitors beeping, the gravity of their words sank in. They'd nearly let me die, but I had the evidence to make them face it. The trap had sprung, and what came next would unravel everything they thought they could control. The hospital room hummed with the steady beep of monitors, the sterile air sharp in my raw throat. I lay in the ER bay, an IV dripping heparin to dissolve the clot that had nearly stopped my lungs. My oxygen mask fogged with each labored breath, but the crushing pressure in my chest was easing barely. Travis sat beside me, his face pale, still in the sweater from dinner, his hand gripping mine. The doctor's words echoed 30 minutes later, and I'd have been gone. That truth fueled me now. My bag retrieved from home by a nurse held the cameras with every damning word from Mom and Tiffany recorded. As I steadied myself against the pillows, I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling, not from weakness, but from purpose. It was time to act. I uploaded the footage to a private cloud, editing clips from the dinner Mom's sharp "quit faking it" and Tiffany's sneering, avoiding cleanup again, alongside older recordings from my notebook days. I spliced in voice memos from past visits, Mom dismissing my migraines as excuses, Tiffany laughing off my asthma as drama. The final cut was raw, unpolished, but undeniable, titled, "They Called It Faking." It was a pulmonary embolism. I posted it to social media with the hashtag #ChildMedicalGaslighting, adding a caption urging viewers to trust their bodies and seek help. By morning, the video had exploded 10,000 views, then 50,000 shares flooding from Minneapolis to coasts I'd never seen. Comments poured in. This happened to me, and how could they ignore her? The internet's outrage became my weapon. The fallout hit fast. Mom, a nurse at the community clinic, was summoned by her supervisor within hours. The viral video showing her dismissing my collapse sparked an internal review. By noon, she was suspended pending investigation for professional misconduct patients, and colleagues had seen the clip, and the clinic couldn't ignore the PR storm. Tiffany, teaching 3rd grade at a local elementary, faced her own reckoning. Parents, alerted by the video's spread through community groups, filed complaints with the school board accusing her of enabling neglect. A petition circulated online, demanding her suspension for modeling dismissive behavior. Her principal called an emergency meeting, and whispers of termination followed. The cameras I'd hidden had done more than record. They'd ignited a fire. I didn't stop there. From my hospital bed, I contacted Child Protective Services, not just for the dinner, but for the years of medical neglect. I sent them my notebook digitized and time-stamped, detailing every ignored illness: strep throat, at 7 broken arm, at 13 asthma attacks dismissed as tantrums. The recordings spanning a decade backed it up. Mom's curt, "You're fine," Tiffany's mocking drama queen. CPS opened a case classifying it as long-term medical neglect, potentially actionable even for past incidents involving an adult. A lawyer friend of Danielle's offered pro bono advice, and we filed a formal complaint citing emotional and physical harm. The evidence was ironclad, and the legal wheels began turning, slow but relentless. Back home, the family unraveled. Grandmother Helen Ward, who'd watched the video through a cousin's phone, called me in tears. "I should have stopped this years ago," she said, her voice shaky but firm. She confronted Mom, refusing to speak to her until she faced the truth. Helen invited Travis to live with her in her downtown condo, and he packed his bags that week, unable to stay in Mom's house after what he'd witnessed. Neighbors, once friendly at block parties, stopped inviting Mom and Tiffany, their whispers audible at the grocery store. The community that had propped up our family's image now shunned them, the viral video a stain they couldn't scrub. Mom tried to visit the hospital the next day, her face drawn, offering a halting apology. "I didn't know it was that serious, Stephanie," she said, avoiding my eyes. Tiffany sent a text claiming she was stressed and didn't mean it. I stared at them through the fog of my recovery, my chest still aching from the clot's damage. "You don't get to walk this back," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "You almost let me die." I turned Mom away, deleted Tiffany's message, and blocked their numbers. Travis, still by my side, nodded silently, understanding my resolve. Danielle arrived from St. Paul, her hug careful around the IV lines, and promised to help me plan my next steps. My recovery was grueling, blood thinners left me bruised, and every twinge in my chest sparked fear of another clot. But as I lay there scrolling through the video's growing comments, I felt a shift. Thousands shared stories of being dismissed, their pain labeled as exaggeration. My story was no longer just mine. It was a call to action. I started responding, connecting with advocacy groups online, my inbox filling with messages from strangers who felt seen. Mom and Tiffany's world was collapsing, their careers and reputations in ruins, while I was building something new. The evidence I'd gathered for years, now public, had turned their gaslighting into their own undoing. As I closed my laptop, the monitors beeping softly, I knew this wasn't over. The fight was just beginning, and I was ready to take it further. 2 weeks after my hospital discharge, I packed my last box and left Minneapolis for St. Paul, moving into Danielle's spare bedroom in a quiet suburb. The small apartment with its hardwood floors and view of snow-dusted streets felt like a fresh start. I blocked Mom and Tiffany's numbers permanently, their half-hearted apologies from the hospital nothing but noise. Travis, now living with grandmother Helen in her downtown condo, stayed in touch through weekly calls, his voice a steady anchor. Helen sent texts filled with warmth, checking on my recovery, her regret for past silences clear in every word. But Karen and Tiffany, I was done. No reconciliation, no second chances. Their dismissal had nearly killed me, and I wasn't giving them power over my life again. My recovery was slow, a grind of blood thinners and follow-up scans. Fatigue lingered, and every chest twinge sent my heart racing, fearing another clot. But the viral video, now at 500,000 views, gave me purpose. Messages flooded my inbox, stories from women, men, even teenagers who'd been called dramatic when their symptoms screamed danger. I started a blog, Medical Gaslighting, sharing my story and theirs, linking to resources on recognizing neglect. Advocacy groups reached out, inviting me to speak at online panels. My pulmonology expertise made my voice resonate, and soon I was drafting a book proposal on surviving medical dismissal, blending science with raw experience. By spring, a publisher signed me and I landed a remote consulting gig with a healthcare nonprofit, my career rebounding stronger than before. Meanwhile, Mom's world collapsed. The clinic swamped with complaints after the video terminated her nursing license after a board review confirmed professional misconduct. Her 30-year career built on discipline crumbled under the weight of her own words captured on tape. Tiffany faced her own ruin. The school board, pressured by parents' petitions, dismissed her from her teaching job, citing her role in enabling neglect as a breach of trust. Socially, they were pariahs, neighbors, who once waved at block parties now crossed the street. Travis told me Mom's house went quiet no more. Family dinners, no invitations. Their financial strain grew as legal fees piled up from my CPS case, which was moving toward a hearing. The notebook and recordings I'd sent detailing years of ignored illnesses made the neglect undeniable, and the case gained traction with a judge. I built my life anew in St. Paul. Weekly therapy helped unpack the trauma, not just the embolism, but the decades of doubt sewn into me. My book, published a year later, hit bestseller lists, and I spoke at medical conferences urging doctors to listen to patients' voices. The viral fame wasn't just a platform, it was a lifeline for others. I connected with survivors, helping them navigate their own fights for validation. Travis visited often, and Helen called regularly, their support a quiet strength. But Mom and Tiffany remained ghosts, cut off, their lives unraveling as mine soared. Looking back, I realized something critical gaslighting can kill. When those closest to you dismiss your pain, call it an act. It doesn't just hurt, it risks your life. My revenge wasn't petty, it was justice. Documenting their neglect, exposing it, wasn't about spite. It was about holding them accountable, ensuring they couldn't harm again. I learned to trust my body to record every sign, every dismissal, and to walk away from toxic ties without guilt. To anyone listening, your symptoms are real. If your family, friends, or even doctors brush them off, don't doubt yourself. Get help, see a specialist, and if the people around you won't listen, leave them behind. Your life is worth more than their denial. Thank you for hearing my story. It's not just mine, it's a call to trust yourself. If this resonates, hit that subscribe button and share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever been dismissed when you knew something was wrong? Let's talk about it. Your voice matters.
What do you mean I'm not in the will anymore? I stared at my father in disbelief, my voice echoing through their spacious living room in Chicago. Exactly what I said, Lana. My father's voice was cold, clinical. Your mother and I have decided that your portion of the inheritance will go to your brother instead. He's actually made something of himself. My mother nodded in agreement, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup. Sweetheart, we've watched you struggle with that little app business of yours for years now. We just think the money would be better utilized by someone who's proven they know how to handle finances. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. At 29, I'd spent the last 4 years building my health tech startup from nothing, living on ramen and working 18-hour days. Yes, it had been a struggle, but I was finally on the verge of something incredible. You can't be serious, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I've put everything into this business. And what do you have to show for it? My father gestured around, as if my lack of a mansion somehow proved his point. Your brother has a corner office at Morgan Stanley. What do you have? A desk in a co-working space and dreams that are too big for your capabilities. The words stung because they weren't new. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. When I got a scholarship to Northwestern instead of Harvard. When I chose computer science over law. When I quit my corporate job to start my own company. This isn't about the money, I said, feeling tears threatening to spill. This is about you never believing in me. Oh, Lana. My mother sighed, exchanging a look with my father. We're just being realistic. Not everyone is meant to be successful. There's no shame in admitting defeat and getting a normal job. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What they didn't know, what I'd been planning to tell them today before they ambushed me with this news, was that my failing business had just secured a meeting with the country's largest healthcare provider. If they signed on, everything would change. As I left their house, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from my lead investor, requesting an urgent call. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I had a feeling things were about to get worse before they got better. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, trying to process what had just happened. The inheritance itself wasn't life-changing, maybe $500,000 that my grandparents had left for each grandchild. But the message behind being cut out was crystal clear. I was the family disappointment. Growing up as the daughter of Harold and Patricia Reynolds meant living under constant pressure. My father had built his wealth through strategic investments in pharmaceutical companies, while my mother came from old money. Success wasn't just encouraged in our family. It was expected, demanded, and narrowly defined. My brother Jake had followed the prescribed path perfectly. Ivy League education, finance career, marriage to a socialite, 2 perfect children, and a summer home in the Hamptons by 35. I, on the other hand, had always been the question mark. Even when I graduated at the top of my class or landed prestigious internships, it was never quite enough. You could have done better, became the family motto for my achievements. 4 years ago, I'd spotted a critical gap in the healthcare technology market. Using my background in computer science and the experience I'd gained working for a major tech company, I developed an AI-driven platform that could predict patient readmission risks with unprecedented accuracy. I called it Prevent Care. My parents had scoffed when I left my six-figure salary to pursue the startup. "Another millennial thinking they'll be the next Steve Jobs," my father had said dismissively. When I asked for their investment, they declined, calling it throwing good money after bad decisions. Instead, I scraped together funding from angel investors who actually understood the technology. I worked day and night, building the platform, securing a small pilot program with a local hospital, and slowly gathering data that proved my system worked. 3 months ago, I'd started hearing rumors that my father was heavily investing in pharmatech, a publicly traded company developing a competing solution. My mother had casually mentioned it at dinner, watching me carefully as she added, "Your father thinks it's going to revolutionize the industry." I'd felt a pang of betrayal but dismissed it. Surely it was coincidence. The healthcare AI space was hot. Everyone was investing in it. My parents wouldn't deliberately back my competition while refusing to support me. Would they? But as I sat in my car, the pieces started falling into place. The timing of being cut from the will. Their increased criticism of my business. The smug looks. Maybe this wasn't just about disappointment. Maybe it was about something else entirely. The call with my lead investor, Dominic, was worse than I'd imagined. He sounded anxious, his usually calm voice now strained. "Lana, Pharmatech just announced a major partnership with MedAlliance. They're implementing their readmission prevention system across all 53 hospitals in the network." My blood ran cold. MedAlliance was the healthcare provider I'd been courting for months, the same one I was supposed to meet with next week. The deal that would have made Prevent Care a legitimate contender in the healthcare technology space. "That's impossible," I stammered. "We've been in talks with them for months. Their technical team loved our solution." "Apparently, Pharmatech swooped in with a massive discount and some high-level connections on the board," Dominic explained. "The rumor is they were tipped off about your meeting and moved quickly to block it." High-level connections. Like a major investor who happened to be my father. "I need to go," I said, my mind racing. I spent the next hour parked outside my parents' house, searching for information about Pharmatech. The company had been struggling for months, their tech inferior to mine, but their marketing budget astronomical. Their stock had been plummeting until this morning's announcement, which sent it soaring by 43%. My phone rang again. It was my former classmate Jennifer, who worked as a junior executive at MedAlliance. "Lana, I'm so sorry about what happened," she said. "I thought you should know. The decision came down from our chairman after he played golf with some investor in Pharmatech. They rushed the deal through without the usual technical review." "Did you catch the investor's name?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Harold Reynolds. He apparently made a very compelling case against your technology, saying it wasn't scalable." My father. My own father had deliberately sabotaged my business. I sat in stunned silence as the reality sank in. This wasn't just parental disappointment or lack of support. This was active sabotage. He had used his connections to steal my opportunity and then had the audacity to cut me from the will for not being successful enough. When I finally drove away from my parents' house, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Everything I'd worked for was crumbling. Without the MedAlliance deal, my runway was limited. We had enough funding for maybe 3 more months before I'd have to let my team go. Part of me wanted to storm back into my parents' house and confront them. Another part wanted to curl up and admit defeat. Instead, I drove to my small office where my team of 5 dedicated developers was still working, unaware that our future had just been jeopardized. I couldn't give up now. Not when they had sacrificed so much to follow my vision. I needed a new plan, and fast. "We need to pivot," I announced to my team the next morning. Their faces registered confusion as I explained what had happened with MedAlliance. So your dad basically torpedoed our biggest opportunity? Miguel, my lead developer, asked incredulously. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. But we're not giving up. Our technology is better than Pharmatech's. We just need to prove it. Over the next 3 weeks, we worked around the clock, refining our algorithm and reaching out to smaller hospital networks. We managed to secure a meeting with Westfield Healthcare, a regional group with 12 hospitals. It wasn't MedAlliance, but it could keep us afloat. The night before the Westfield presentation, I received a text from my brother Jake. Heard about MedAlliance, tough break. Maybe time to consider that job offer at Deloitte? Dad knows someone who could fast-track your application. I didn't respond. Jake had always been the diplomatic one, trying to mediate between my parents and me. But he'd also always chosen their side when it mattered. The Westfield presentation went flawlessly. Their technical team asked challenging questions, which we answered confidently. By the end, their chief medical officer was nodding enthusiastically. Your predictive accuracy is impressive, she said. We'll need to run this by the board, but I'm optimistic. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Maybe we could recover from the MedAlliance setback after all. 3 days later, that hope was shattered when I received a formal email from Westfield. After careful consideration, we've decided to pursue alternative solutions for our readmission prevention needs. We appreciate your time and wish you success in your future endeavors. It made no sense. The technical team had been enthusiastic. What had changed? The answer came later that afternoon when Miguel burst into my office, his face pale. You need to see this, he said, showing me his tablet. It was a press release from Pharmatech announcing a strategic partnership with Reynolds Investment Group, my father's company, to accelerate adoption of their healthcare AI solution across regional markets. The first-name partner? Westfield Healthcare. He's systematically blocking us, I whispered, the full weight of the betrayal sinking in. When I called Westfield's CMO, she sounded genuinely regretful. The board overruled us. One of our major investors insisted we go with Pharmatech. I didn't need to ask who that investor was. That evening, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Lana, your father and I would like you to join us for dinner tomorrow. We have something important to discuss. My first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. Fine. 7 o'clock? Perfect. And Lana? Try to dress appropriately. The Hutchinsons might stop by. The Hutchinsons, my father's business associates. So this wasn't a personal dinner. It was another opportunity for them to showcase their successful son while highlighting my failures. I arrived at precisely 7, wearing my best business dress, not to impress them, but to armor myself against their judgment. To my surprise, my parents were warm and welcoming, acting as if our last encounter had never happened. Darling, we've been thinking, my mother began over appetizers. Perhaps we were hasty in our decision about the inheritance. My father nodded. We might be willing to reconsider under certain conditions. I raised an eyebrow. What conditions? Simple, really, my father said smoothly. Shut down that little app business of yours and come work for me at Reynolds Investment. We could use someone with your technical background to evaluate potential healthcare investments. The offer was clear. Abandon my dream and embrace theirs, and I could have my place in the will back. It was a trap disguised as an olive branch. I need some time to think about it, I said carefully, knowing I needed to play along while I figured out my next move. The following morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about my parents' sudden change of heart didn't add up. Why offer me a position now, when they'd been actively working to undermine my business? I decided to do some digging. Using my background in data analysis, I began researching Pharmatech's financial statements and major shareholders. What I discovered left me breathless. Reynolds Investment Group had acquired a 15% stake in Pharmatech 6 months ago, around the time my company had started gaining attention in healthcare circles. My father hadn't just invested in a competing company. He'd bet heavily on it, becoming one of its largest individual shareholders. But there was more. Pharmatech's technology was fundamentally flawed. Their early trial results had been cherry-picked to show success, but the full data set, which I accessed through a healthcare database, showed alarming inaccuracies in their predictive model. They were selling smoke and mirrors, and my father had to know it. This wasn't just business. This was personal. My father was willing to back an inferior product and risk patient outcomes just to prove me wrong. As I dug deeper, I discovered something else. Pharmatech was burning through cash at an alarming rate. Their quarterly report showed massive expenditures on marketing and executive compensation, while their R&D budget had been slashed. They were barely staying afloat, propped up by investor confidence and the recent partnerships my father had orchestrated. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. My parents' entire investment portfolio was now heavily weighted toward Pharmatech. Their financial future depended on its success, and by extension, on my failure. Just as I was processing this information, I received an email that changed everything. It was from Dr. Gabriela Rodriguez, the Director of Innovation at National Health Systems, the second-largest healthcare provider in the country. Ms. Reynolds, your presentation at the Healthcare Innovation Summit last month caught my attention. I've been following your work and would like to discuss potential applications of your technology across our network. Could you meet next week? National Health Systems, with over 70 hospitals nationwide, would be an even bigger client than MedAlliance. This was the break we needed. I immediately called Miguel and the team to prepare for the meeting. We worked day and night, refining our presentation and enhancing our demo with the latest data. This time, I kept everything completely confidential. No one outside my immediate team knew about the opportunity. The meeting with Dr. Rodriguez and her technical team exceeded all expectations. They understood the superiority of our approach immediately. What sets your solution apart, Dr. Rodriguez said, is that it's built on solid statistical principles instead of marketing hype. We've evaluated Pharmatech and found their claims exaggerated. By the end of the 4-hour meeting, we had a handshake agreement to move forward with a pilot program across 5 of their largest hospitals. As I drove home, elated but exhausted, my phone rang. It was my father. Lana, have you considered our offer? The position won't stay open forever. I'm still thinking about it, I said, fighting to keep my voice neutral. Actually, I'm meeting with some potential investors next week who might be interested in acquiring PreventCare. If that happens, I'll definitely consider your offer. It was a lie, but I needed time. The National Health Systems deal wasn't final yet, and I couldn't risk my father discovering it and interfering again. Investors? Who would want to buy a failing startup? He scoffed. You'd be surprised, Dad. Sometimes the things you underestimate are the ones that end up changing everything. The pilot with National Health Systems began quietly. For 6 weeks, our system ran alongside existing protocols at 5 of their hospitals, analyzing patient data and predicting readmission risks with remarkable accuracy. The results were undeniable. Our algorithm outperformed not only their current system, but also Pharmatech's solution, which they'd been testing at 2 other facilities. Meanwhile, I played along with my parents' narrative, occasionally dropping hints that I was considering my options and meeting with potential buyers, feeding my father's belief that my company was on its last legs. One evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my office, Jennifer from MedAlliance. I shouldn't be here, she said nervously, but I had to show you this. She handed me an internal report showing that Pharmatech's system was failing spectacularly at MedAlliance. Readmission predictions were barely better than random chance, and the implementation costs had ballooned to 3 times the initial estimate. The board is furious, but they're trapped in a multi-year contract, Jennifer explained, and Harold Reynolds is pressuring them to keep quiet about the issues. I thanked Jennifer for the information, and after she left, I called Dr. Rodriguez. How quickly could we scale the pilot to all your hospitals if the results continue to be positive? With these numbers? We could begin full implementation within 60 days, she replied. In fact, I've already drafted the proposal for the board. Everything was falling into place, but I needed one more piece to secure our future. I reached out to Oliver Barnes, a prominent healthcare industry reporter who had covered my company in its early days. "I have a story for you," I told him. "It involves falsified data, conflicts of interest, and patient safety concerns." 2 days later, as I was finalizing the contract with National Health Systems, Miguel burst into my office with a panicked expression. "We've got a problem," he said. "Someone's trying to breach our servers. They're after our algorithm." I immediately knew who was behind it. With Pharmatech failing, my father must be desperate to get his hands on our superior technology. "Lock everything down," I instructed, "and prepare for Emergency Protocol Dawn." Protocol Dawn was our contingency plan for exactly this scenario, a complete backup of our system to secure servers, followed by a deliberate planting of false data to mislead any successful intruders. For the next 48 hours, we worked non-stop to secure our systems while simultaneously finalizing the National Health Systems contract. The timing was critical. If we could announce the partnership before Pharmatech realized what was happening, we'd have the upper hand. On the morning we were set to sign with National Health Systems, I received a call from my mother. "Lana, your father and I are concerned. We've heard rumors that you're meeting with National Health today. Tell me that's not true." I hesitated, tempted to reveal everything, but it was too soon. "Mom, I can't discuss my business dealings right now." "Lana, listen to me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Your father has invested everything in Pharmatech. Everything. If they lose the National Health contract, we could lose everything." For a moment, I felt a twinge of doubt. These were my parents, after all. But then I remembered all the times they'd undermined me, dismissed my dreams, and actively worked to ensure my failure. "I have to go, Mom. I have an important meeting to attend." As I hung up, I squared my shoulders and walked into the conference room where Dr. Rodriguez and her team were waiting, contract in hand. It was time to change everything. The National Health Systems deal was signed with minimal fanfare, just handshakes, signatures, and a small press release. But that press release was a precision-guided missile. National Health Systems selects Prevent Care for system-wide implementation after competitive analysis shows 89% greater accuracy than current market leader. We didn't name Pharmatech explicitly, but everyone in the industry knew who the current market leader was. The impact was immediate. Healthcare technology forums exploded with discussion, and investors began asking pointed questions about Pharmatech's claims. That same afternoon, Oliver Barnes published his exposé, "Smoke and Mirrors: The Truth Behind Pharmatech's AI Claims." The article was devastating, detailing how Pharmatech had manipulated trial data, exaggerated results, and leveraged conflicts of interest to secure contracts. It specifically highlighted how Reynolds Investment Group had pressured healthcare providers to adopt the technology despite known flaws. By market close, Pharmatech's stock had plummeted 67%, and trading was temporarily halted due to volatility. The company issued a weak statement promising to address the concerns, but the damage was done. I watched it all unfold from my office, feeling strangely calm. This wasn't mere revenge, it was justice. Patient lives were at stake with this technology, and the truth needed to come out. My phone buzzed continuously with messages, from industry contacts, former classmates, even Jake, who sent a simple text. "Is this real? Call me." I ignored them all, except for a message from Dr. Rodriguez. "The board is impressed. They want to discuss potential equity investment in Prevent Care." That was the real victory, not just a contract, but validation and the chance to scale our solution nationally without compromising our vision. The company I had built against all odds would not just survive, it would thrive. And tomorrow I would deal with my parents. I didn't have to wait until tomorrow. My parents arrived at my office unannounced that evening, their faces ashen. My father, always imposing in his tailored suits, looked diminished somehow. My mother's perfect composure had cracked, her hands nervously twisting her designer handbag. "What have you done?" my father demanded, his voice hoarse. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. "Please sit down." "Our stocks are worthless," my mother blurted out. "Pharmatech is finished. Harold's investment group is facing inquiries from the SEC. We're ruined, Lana, completely ruined." I studied them both, searching for any sign of remorse or understanding. I found none, only fear and blame. "I didn't do anything except build a better product and tell the truth," I said calmly. "You chose to back a company that falsified data and put patients at risk." "We need your help," my father said, the words clearly painful for him. "The house, our investments, everything is tied to Pharmatech. We have nowhere else to turn." The irony wasn't lost on me. Just weeks ago, they had cut me from their will for being a failure. Now they were the ones asking for a bailout. "I understand you're in a difficult position," I said, echoing my mother's patronizing tone from countless conversations. "But I can't be your financial safety net." My father's face hardened. "After everything we've done for you." "That's just it," I interrupted. "What exactly have you done except undermine me at every turn? You taught me that people should succeed on their own merits. I'm going to respect that lesson." I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "I can refer you to a good financial advisor. Beyond that, I think it's best if we take some time apart." As they left my office, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet certainty that I had finally broken free from their shadow. The next morning, I gathered my team to share the news about National Health System's investment offer. As we celebrated this milestone, I looked around at these brilliant people who had believed in my vision when my own family hadn't. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," I told them, "but today we've proven that doing the right thing, building something with integrity, eventually wins." Later, alone in my office, I removed the family photo from my desk drawer where I'd hidden it months ago. I studied the smiling faces, a facade that had masked years of conditional love and impossible standards. I placed the frame face down in the bottom drawer. Perhaps someday we would find our way back to each other, but it would have to be on new terms, with mutual respect and acceptance. For now, I had a company to build and patients whose lives we could improve. That was legacy enough.